ESNY.
And we're back. What's up, folks? This is ESNY's Jets All the Way podcast. I, of course, am Jeff Maglicetti, New York Jets beat writer, as well as New York Liberty beat writer for ESNY. Joining me, of course, is another Jets beat writer, Robbie Sabo, and our fearless leader, the editor-in-chief, King of the Hill, top of the heap. Rob, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm good. Of course I'm good, Jeff.
Hard not to feel good after an eventful offseason here in Jets land. Of course, training camp just over a couple weeks away, headed into the summer, going up to Florham Park, ready for training camp 2019, what's sure to be an exciting season and even an even bigger regular season just bursting with potential. Today on the podcast, we'll be talking about the offseason that was in Jets land, what they did right, what they did wrong, what's to come, what could be. Rob, so let's start off. Overall thoughts on this offseason?
I think it was an offseason of glitz and glamour.
Yeah, interesting.
Star power. And because of the star power, I think it confuses people a little bit.
How so?
Well, it's the household names. Bell. Right. Everyone that they brought in. You think they're going to take a logical step forward, but it's possible they stay right where they're at.
You know, it's an interesting thought because I've seen so many teams in the past, I think we see it most on the basketball level and the football level as well. There's so much, when you bring in name brand talent, there always seems to be a bit of an issue at the early onset. Like, for example, look what happened with that dream team Philadelphia Eagles team. They brought in all those free agents that year, and they ended up going 7-9, 8-8 in that season. We saw it. We've seen it recently already with the Cleveland Browns. How there might be already some issues brewing with Odell Beckham Jr. down there. So this is going to be an interesting task for the Jets. And the big question I think is going to be, how can they avoid such a lull? Because we've seen at the NBA level too. I mean, people tend to forget that the big three down in Miami, the Heatles, as they were known as at the time, the LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade combination, they got off to a slow start as well, people tend to forget.
Yeah, they did. And I think the most important thing is, what are the realistic expectations for the Jets? And I talked about this earlier today. It's so hard to pinpoint what the realistic expectations are because of the turnover with the coaching staff, the front office, Darnold's second year. You got the right quarterback, you think, but you don't know what he's going to do, and you don't know what the line in front of him is going to do. That's a wild card. Le'Veon Bell missing an entire season. What is he going to do? There are so many factors that make it so unknown. So what are realistic expectations? 5 wins? 10 wins? What is it?
I think realistically, it sounds cliche. It sounds like a cop-out in a way. The realistic expectation for the Jets right now, if you're doing an over-under for the Jets right now, or an even in a way, it should be 8 wins. If this team goes 8-8 this season, I think you can look at that as a metaphorical win. Now, look, I've never really been too much into the concept of moral victories. In fact, back in college when I hosted my own talk radio show, the Magged Up Radio program, hopefully coming back soon at some point in the future, the Magged Up Radio show, I would always conclude with the quote-unquote disclaimer that if moral victories counted, we would all be undefeated. And if moral victories counted for the Jets, then let's face it, the 2017 team might have won the Super Bowl, because that was a team that some thought would go winless, and they ended up putting up some great efforts and whatnot, and that whole thing. So the December Jets last year, that team could have been a playoff team if we're going to count moral victories. But if you get 8-8 and get a relative state of even just football mediocrity back into this team, I definitely think that they could view that as a win. Do you agree?
Yes, but the more important issue here is, did you come up with the name Magged Up?
I did. Magged Up. Magged spacebar UP.
I'll tell you what, Francesa mic'd up. I know he doesn't have a case, but he might file copyright
I'm
It's kind of along those same lines.
that's kind of where I drew the inspiration from. I stopped short of having a musically inclined friend of mine go magged up. He's ready to go. I didn't, I respect Mike. I didn't want to. I didn't want to do all of that, and I wanted to develop some original shtick. Hence the moral victories comment. But I thought there was different enough. I thought maybe at some point we could have a good laugh about it. But I actually spoke to Francesa like almost a year ago, interviewed him back when the app first came. I met him at a DraftKings event, interviewed him. The interview can be seen on EliteSportsNY.com. By the way, it was posted back in September, week 1 of the football season. And I did not mention it to him. I did mention to him, you want to know the first time I met with Francesa? It's probably one of the most random sporting events in the world. Do you have a guess at all?
The Bassmasters Classic.
No, not the Bassmasters Classic. Good one, don't get me wrong, but I met him back when I was 9 years old in January 2002. Nets Wizards at the Continental Airlines Arena. That was when the Nets were slowly starting their rise under Jason Kidd and Byron Scott. And that was Michael Jordan's first game at the Meadowlands as a Washington Wizard. And I met both him and the Mad Dog there. They were broadcasting live, got my picture taken with them, dressed in my Jordan Wizards jersey. I had gotten the tickets for Christmas that year. It was one of the best things ever. And reality kind of struck when Jordan went 3 for 15 from the field and the Wizards lost by 45. But it was overall a great night. It was a great night that I remember. I obviously told Frances about it. He did not remember. Great as Mike is, he did not remember any of that. But just an interesting anecdote I'd like to share.
Yeah, Mike in the Meadowlands. What was it then?
Continental
after Brendan Byrne, right?
I mean, look, as a child of the '90s, I think it's always going to be Continental to me. I kind of, I know corporate sponsorships and whatnot. For example, the All-Star game, the MLB All-Star game the other day, I still call it Jacobs Field from time to time. I'm even inclined to say New Shea instead of Citi Field. I mean, I don't obviously in a professional setting, but just in a casual sense, I still call it Continental. I still call it Jacobs Field. But corporate sponsorships, Continental kind of stuck with me with that, so I still call it Continental.
Yeah, like the Igloo in Pittsburgh too.
Nailed it.
To me, it'll always be nicknamed the Igloo. No matter what.
Not Mellon Arena. I get that. Yeah. So I grew up with that. So I remember at the time my parents were both working in the pharmaceutical industry, so they took clients to a lot of events. So I remember going to a few Nets games. I remember going to a few New Jersey Red Dogs games as well. Remember them?
I don't remember them. What were the Red Dogs?
The New Jersey Red Dogs were arena football.
I do not remember. I do remember the roller hockey. Remember when roller hockey started to take off a little bit?
Vaguely.
In the late 90s, I went to one of those at the Continental, but I forget the team. I wore my Leech jersey representing, but it that faded pretty quickly.
Yeah, I can imagine. But back when arena football was a big craze, they were slowly but surely starting to make a mark on it. Back when ESPN, I remember that was the height of arena football's power. The Red Dogs had moved to Las Vegas by then because the Red Dogs became the New Jersey Gladiators, who subsequently moved to Vegas and subsequently moved to Cleveland and subsequently folded at this point. I believe the AFL still exists in like a 4-team form right now. I'm not really sure how it works or anything, but I believe the Gladiators don't exist anymore. But you had the Red Dogs over at the Meadowlands, and the New York City Hawks were over at Madison Square Garden.
I remember the City Hawks.
Yes. Yep. And let's just face it, they were not very good. And you tune in for a Jets podcast, you get a history of local arena football. We'll get back to the Jets in a second, but one thing I just remember the City Hawks, I think they won 5 games in their 2 years of existence, went over to the Hartford Civic Center and became the Hartford or Connecticut Phantoms. And I remember just the state of the two teams. The City Hawks were invented solely to compete with the Red Dogs and get an AFL team in the New York City area. And everything was just poorly mishandled from the start. I mean, what do you expect from Madison Square Garden production? Unfortunately, we've come to realize in terms of the Knicks, lesser extent, the Rangers to a far, far, far lesser extent, but still. But what defined the two teams better than anything? The Red Dogs in 1 week scored 91 points, which were at the time an AFL record. It would take the City Hawks an entire month to reach 91 points. So I remember that. There's your AFL lesson for the day.
I really quickly want to point out how sick it is that you know those numbers.
Oh well, let's just say, Rob, I'm in desperate need of a social life, and I'm in desperate need of a social life / girlfriend, and it's not going to get much better with the XFL returning this February. I've already started to make myself familiar with the people in charge of the New York organization, and I'm already refreshing myself on the history of the New York, New Jersey Hitmen so I could bring it up come February.
I hope Gilbride brings back the old school run and shoot. That would be something.
Oh, that's going to be very entertaining. But we digress, moving from the Arena League to the National Football League. So you look at this Jets team right now. I believe that back to what we were talking about, 8 wins, I think, is realistic for this team because there just needs to be a sense of football normalcy, and mediocrity would be a victory for this team right now because they're working on a streak, one of the longer streaks in the NFL right now without the postseason. And that should sort itself out later because right now I think in the AFC there are too many established contenders right now for the Jets to truly insert themselves back in that picture. Because let's face it, in the East, the New England monopoly more than likely going to continue on the AFC East. In the North, the Browns are resurrected. The Ravens and Steelers are still going to be forces to be reckoned with. Down the South, I think anyone can win that division down there between the Colts, the Texans, the Titans, even the Jacksonville Jaguars, now that the Blake Bortles dilemma has sorted itself out. The West is another one. All those teams are going to be dangerous down there, even Denver and Oakland. And, you have the Top Gun contenders in Kansas City and the Los Angeles Chargers. So I just think there's too many established contenders right now for the Jets to truly contend for a playoff spot. So mediocrity shouldn't be the goal, but it's not something they should be, upset with themselves in obtaining this year, I think.
Yeah, but the thing is, 2020, they have a legitimate shot to be contenders in 2020.
Yes, exactly.
They also, Joe Douglas just needs one offseason. In this league, that's why this rebuilding thing, this false narrative of rebuilding is so frustrating. It's gone on for 4 years now. This is the NFL. A rebuild is one great offseason, one great draft. And they have a chance in 2020 to be really special if Douglas does the right thing along the offensive line and shores up the 4-man conventional pass rush. So a win, 8-8 is a tremendous win this season, if you ask me.
Definitely. And you know what? In the NFL, a rebuild, first of all, the concept of a rebuild and tanking in the NFL is almost ludicrous because, one season in the NFL feels like an eternity, and one quick rebuild season can spiral into a losing culture immediately. And the Jets have found this lesson out the hard way several times. And now that they have a quarterback whom they believe is perhaps the most legitimate Joe Namath successor since probably ever, this becomes huge right now because Darnold, even if Mark Sanchez led the team to an AFC title game in his rookie year, even if guys like Ken O'Brien had their moments of glory with this squad, there is a sense of firmness with Darnold that has not been present with this team for such a long time. So this makes the next few years very careful. You have to be very careful, very delicate in a way, and you need to make sure that this relationship is fostered as best as possible. So the Jets went after the name brand talent this year, and it could either be good or it can combust in their face right now. I think the big question is going to be whether Adam Gase is the right man to lead this squad right now. He's brought in some strong, savvy football minds, if not controversial a little bit, bringing in Greg Williams to be the defensive coordinator. So, Gase has made it clear that he wants his mark on this team. I thought that was very clear in, the power play or lack thereof in getting Mike Maccagnan out of there. We'll probably never know the true behind the scenes story of what happened, but I think it was apparent that Gase wanted his power with the flurry of moves that he made once, he was in the interim, he was the acting general manager of this team, trading Darren Lee, bringing in some of his old guys like punter Matt Darr. So I definitely think Gase, it's going to be a big question of whether Adam Gase is the right man to lead this job, but I don't think there's any doubt that he wants to be the man for this job, because we've seen coaches, I think several points throughout the past, they've taken a bit of a nonchalant approach to their squads. Gase wants to be completely hands-on, and he wants to be involved in the making of this team, in the rise or fall, for better or worse. He wants his fingerprints on it.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at it, there was tremendous backlash.
Yes.
Beat writers got emotional. And it wasn't because they fired Maccagnan. It was because they told them no one was getting fired.
They waited.
And then suddenly, boom, it happens. So the emotional backlash from the media trickled down to the fans, and everyone called him a joke, a laughingstock. But think about it from Gase's point of view. Would you rather have a coach who walks in the door and believes his general manager doesn't know what he's doing and roll with that?
Right.
Or would you rather have a coach who says, "Nuh-uh, we're gonna win, and if I don't think this guy knows what he's doing, I'm gonna get him the hell out of here, get the right guy in here, and we're gonna win"? Which version would you rather have as a fan?
Yeah, a fan would take the latter version every single time, and it reminds me of a piece that you wrote earlier this offseason, I believe. It was on EliteSportsNewYork.com. You mentioned how the quote unquote New York Jets apocalypse kind of fell by the wayside, and here I just found it on ESNY, and the headline reads, quote, "The fictional New York Jets apocalypse comes out clean on the other side." And I do remember that, when the Maccagnan news came out, everyone was like, "Oh, same old Jets, LOL Jets," making the memes, making the social media posts, the tweets, everything went viral. And, it's almost was a source of like Jets for clicks, something we've seen far too often, I think, from a New York Knicks standpoint as well, with the how many power forwards that they're adding. But you mentioned that, after all the malarkey, all the tumultuous news headlines and naysayers and doomsday predictors, things actually turned out well for the Jets, and they emerged from this somehow with a sense of stability.
Well, listen, you can't excuse the timing. There's no doubt. I don't buy the rationalization that the calendar year starts then when the scouting starts. He should have been gone with Bowles.
Yes.
So the timing you can't excuse, but the timing is a fraction of 1% of the importance that it is to actually have the right man in the job.
Right.
So in that, everyone lost their minds and lost just how inept the drafting has been. I mean, you want to give Maccagnan credit for Darnold? I can't. His terrible teams, terrible records put him in that position to grab that guy. So, everyone lost their heads. I believe they have the right guy. If you think about Douglas, what did he say on day one? You win in the trenches.
Right.
You win with the quarterback and you win in the trenches. And it starts there. Not once over 5 drafts has Maccagnan said that. All he said is best available player, best available player, best available player, which doesn't work in football. You need balanced units. Every unit helps the other unit. And more units, like the line, like the trenches, overwhelmingly help other units as opposed to vice versa. So focus on the right guy for the job. And I think they got it. I think they got it done.
It reminded me in several ways, as a matter of fact, of the final days of the Jerry Reese era over with the New York Giants, because he was the same way by insisting that the best player available was the right way to go. Best player available is such an interesting concept when it comes to the NFL draft. I believe it's a luxury to teams because, best player available basically assumes that you have no pressing needs at that point. Best player available is a luxury available to you when you are, quote unquote, one move away from the Super Bowl. And right now, I don't think the Jets are one move away from the Super Bowl. They're still several smaller moves away from the Super Bowl. And that's another thing that that Douglas said in his opening presser. He mentioned something that, they were going to work the waiver wire. The Jets have a high priority spot. Again, thanks to the poor records obtained under McCagnon, they are going to utilize their high priority on the waiver wire. And I think that's really interesting. And, you look at the draft this year, and yeah, they brought in Quinnen Williams, but I felt several other moves could have been made. There were no interior linemen selected. They used the fourth round where they could have taken, a young developing cornerback prospect like Julian Love out of Notre Dame, who ended up going to the Giants. They ended up taking a tight end who they want to which is not only a position, tight end, where they're relatively solidified thanks to another fourth round pick, Chris Herndon, but they want to turn Trevon Wesco into a bit of a fullback, I believe. It's something that we'll definitely keep an eye on in training camp and the preseason moving forward. So I definitely think that things could have been done better in the draft this year. There's plenty of, like we've discussed on this program before, there's plenty of high risk, high reward guys with, character issues like Ja'Kai Polite or Chuma Idaga. So I definitely think that this is going to be interesting. Blake Cashman and Blessuan Austin come in. They've had a little bit of the problems with the injuries. So I definitely think that this draft, is going to be one of the things that is going to define McCagnon's ultimate legacy in New York, because he can welcome in if the Jets do surpass the metaphorical 8-8 mark that we've been talking about so often, the metaphorical mark of mediocrity. Try saying that one 5 times fast. But if they exceed that expectation, he could come in, and we talked about it a couple weeks ago, in terms of he could come in like Orson Krennic in Rogue One: A Star Wars Story and declare, "We stand here amidst my achievement, not yours." But ultimately, this is Gase's squad and this is Douglas's squad, and their fingerprints are on this moving forward. Douglas has gone about this in a more charismatic and personifiable way than Gase right now. He's been a bit on edge, but sometimes that's what you have to do. I'm certainly not faulting him for that. Sometimes you have to be direct with these guys and in this league. So either way, they're going about this with two different approaches, it appears, but so far it looks like it's brought some relative peace to a franchise that's been in desperate need of it for a long, long time.
And that's where you win. You mentioned the mid to late round picks. You win in this league.
Yes.
By value. Stars are great, but it's not a superstar league. It's a value league. You have to make value under the salary cap, because all 32 teams' rosters are so similar because of the salary cap. They're so similar in talent. You win at the coaching position. You win in the front office. You win at quarterback. You win at strong safety, offensive line, 4-man conventional pass rush. And quarterback's down, strong safety's down. The other 4 are still up for debate.
I think we discussed several times. You look at, say, the New England Patriots, and it's almost like, how many times have we watched Patriots games over the years and watched some nobody rise to the occasion, and the announcers will go on and on how this was a late round pick. This guy came out of nowhere to truly make a difference. Like, look at Julian Edelman, 7th round in 2009. Matthew Slater, 5th rounder in 2015. He turned out to be a bit of a special team stud in a way. You look at so many guys on the Patriots roster, so many heroes for them throughout the years. Even a 7th round quarterback like Matt Castle was able to step in and do a great job in place of Tom Brady. There's so many guys on the Patriots roster that they've hit on in day 3, and people wonder why they've had such a monopoly on the AFC East for all these years. It's no secret. Like you said, the value comes in day 3, and the Jets need these day 3 guys to rise up to the occasion, perhaps even more so than the day 1s.
And this is it. I mean, if you look at the rosters and compare the Jets and the Pats, it's not dissimilar. It's not that different. It's the culture. It's the game plan. It's what's in between the ears, and it's the structure. Look at the Pats. Look at Brady. The most underrated aspect about Tom Brady's career is he's enjoyed the best offensive line stretch of any quarterback in NFL history.
Undoubtedly.
This man doesn't get touched for 7-8 seconds in the pocket. It goes so unnoticed. If that structure is there, it allows so many guys to flourish and develop around it. And that's the structure and the culture the Jets need to nail down. in year one this year.
And you know what? The thing is about Brady, we talk about how great his blocking has been. The thing is, they've done so with just a rotating group of linemen every so often. I mean, guys like look at the original Super Bowl winning teams, the 01s, the 03s, guys like Matt Light, Damian Woody, Dan Compton, Joe Andruzzi. They've given way to new players. They've given way to guys like Logan Mankin, Steve Neal, Sebastian Ballmer. They got Dan Connolly has come in, Nate Solder for a while. Everyone has come in and done their job in that lineup. Shaq Mason, he was a fourth round addition a couple years back that the Patriots nailed on. They took a chance on guys like Marcus Cannon, people like David Andrews in there. They have come in, and brilliant coaching, brilliant football minds have molded them into an absolute powerhouse that we have not seen in the likes of the NFL probably ever. So this is where it begins. The Jets went for name brand talent this offseason, but sometimes it's the not so name brand talent that helps you win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Dante Scarnecchia coaching too. And look at the 4 teams from last year: the Patriots, the Chiefs, the Saints, the Rams.
Right.
What do they all have in common? Their lines are dominant.
Yeah.
Todd Gurley didn't do much his first year. Neither did Goff. When Whitworth came and rounded that unit off, they were unstoppable.
Right.
The Chiefs, they lose Hunt. They lose Kareem Hunt. Damian Williams plays just as good, if not better.
Didn't lose a step.
It's half of the offense, 5 of 11.
Yeah.
And that structure has to be there. That's why the best available player stuff, sometimes you just have to say no more. No more of this nonsense. We got to force the issue and develop the inside. Right. And that's what I just didn't see. I needed to see that fire from McCagnon in that area. With this draft, I would have, no matter, we will never know what he was offered, but I would have traded down and even taken less value to trade down to make sure that I filled in some of those holes that are so essential for Darnold moving forward.
And of course, that is where this team is going to succeed in fall. It's all about surrounding Darnold with the right type of guys. And they did that in this offseason. They brought in the name brands to help Sam. They brought in Le'Veon Bell. They brought in Kaleki Osemele, who was a Pro Bowler not too long ago. But I think the biggest offseason additions that the Jets made were a couple guys they brought back in Quincy Enunwa and Robbie Anderson, placing a second-round tender on the ladder. So I definitely think that, Sam spoke so many times last season, on how those two guys, he was developing a great rapport with them and how he was, developing strong receivers. And, look at the great quarterbacks throughout NFL history. All of them seem to have a guy they could always throw to, a guy they could always rely on. Like Peyton, and sometimes it's not even, the name brand names out there. Like Peyton Manning, that guy probably extended Brendan Stokely's career by at least 6 years in the NFL. So I definitely think that it's good to get him this sense of familiarity, a good sense of camaraderie in the offense right now. And the Jets did a good job in that regard, of solid parting gift from McCagnon, if you will.
Yeah, they did. And Nunwa, I love Nunwa, but he's got to stay healthy. He's played 40 games out of a total 80 over 5 seasons. He's so critical to this offense because he's really the only possession guy Darnold has other than Herndon. Those underneath, anything you need, crucial 3rd and 5, 3rd and 7 routes. Anderson, his speed is ridiculous. He's a straight line runner, though. He doesn't really have the hips. Crowder's that X factor. Crowder could run those routes too. But Enunwa is so crucial to the offense moving forward. And they did do a good job. He does have weapons. I am completely happy with the weapons. But it'll take Osemele getting back to Pro Bowl status. It'll take Beachum not falling off at all at age 30. It'll take Jonathan Harrison becoming a big boy for this team to potentially win 10 games.
Yeah, it's interesting how you mentioned Jonathan Harrison. He's such an interesting case to me in that he performed admirably once the Jets decided they had enough of Spencer Long at center. But I think he could be the true X factor of this Jets offense this season. Your thoughts?
I think he's the most important player on the roster right now.
Oh, well said.
He's the most important player. He's number 1, and Ja'Kai Polite is probably number 2.
Oh, interesting. Ja'Kai Polite. Why is that?
Well, they need that edge, just like the O-line. They need that edge presence so badly. Um, Henry, Leo, Quinnen, they're interior players. You don't want them outside. So if Ja'Kai Polite, Jordan Jenkins is what he is. He's tremendous against the run. He could collect 5 to 8 sacks, but they need that double-digit sack guy.
Yes.
And if Polite could somehow shock the football world, their defense is complete, other than corner. But you can get by with average corners if you have a pass rush. That's why Polite, or Brandon Copeland, one of the two.
And you mentioned how having a pass rush is going to be so important, and that brings up the interesting quandary of the Jets' schedule this year. Now, we went over it back in April, but you look at it again. We talked about how that opening stretch is going to be so important for them. I mean, you look at the first 7 games, the first 7 regular season games. They're going to be home against Buffalo and home against Cleveland. Those are the first 2 games. And while those 2 didn't make the playoffs last year, they could be described as still up-and-coming squads that are going to be dangerous. And they have 2 young quarterbacks in Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield. So, and they can move around too. So I definitely so that's going to be big. That's
isn't it funny how the AFC East turned out? Brady and 3 of the kids from the big quarterback draft class.
Right. That's insane how that worked out. But that's destiny in the NFL.
Yeah.
See how
and Mayfield's out. Mayfield's playing the AFC East this year, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I believe so, unless Cleveland is going to be the Jets, that one outlier game.
It's the extra game.
I do believe, though. Actually, I think you're right, because the Jets also play Baltimore and Pittsburgh this year.
Yep,
so
you're right. Yep.
The Browns are scheduled.
Baker plays the AFC East, so those 4 quarterbacks are going at it head to head, if not multiple times this year.
Like the Browns. The Browns game against the Patriots, that might be a nationally televised game. Now, okay, it's in the 4:00 window on CBS during Week 8. But how interesting is that to see the Browns? Must-see TV. That's going to be interesting. They even have a Monday night game against Cleveland this year. But back to the Jets schedule. We talked about how the first 6 games, the first 7 weeks, are absolutely crucial for them, because their bye week is sandwiched in the middle. And after the Bills and Browns, at New England, at Philadelphia, home against the Dallas Cowboys, home against New England on Monday night to end that stretch. Those are 4 teams who all not only went to the playoffs last year, but won at least one playoff game in the process as well. So that's going to be such an interesting stretch. And we talk about, the 8-8 mark. If you can emerge from that stretch 2-4, you might chalk that up to being a win, because after that, it's a relatively manageable slate. Looking at it real quickly going forward, Jaguars, at Dolphins, home against the Giants, at the Redskins, Raiders, at Bengals. Then to end the year in December 8th, they start against the Bengals on December 1st. Then they home against the Dolphins, at Baltimore. That's a Thursday night game. Home against the Steelers, and then at the Bills. That is such a manageable slate. Now, knowing not just the Jets and their propensity for bad luck, but knowing the NFL general and the any given Sunday concept, they're not going to go through that stretch unscathed. They're not going to get through that 10-0 stretch unscathed. In fact, they might just slip up one of those games against a Miami team that many see could hold the number 1 pick in the 2020 NFL draft. So that 6-game stretch is so huge. And the quarterbacks they have to play, going back to the pass rush, the quarterbacks they have to play through that: Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, Tom Brady, Carson Wentz, Dak Prescott, Tom Brady. Those are quarterbacks that can kill you in multiple ways. So that 6-game stretch is going to be huge for the pass rush, and for the team in general.
Yeah, you're so right. The opening of the schedule is so crucial. I think at the NFL, except for the NHL, is the place where you could mostly play above your talent or below your talent.
Yeah.
And if you get off to a great start, a raucous start, the locker room goes crazy, and you're building that momentum, that carries you so far in the NFL. So that's a reason why I think the Giants are going to be good this year, by the way. I think they're going to improve pretty greatly.
How so?
And shock a lot of people.
Explain.
I just think the Gettleman moves that he made Again, they're not popular,
Uh-huh.
but he's building something from within. He improved the offensive line. He got rid of unnecessary, wasted salary cap excess like Vernon.
Know who you're talking about.
Beckham has never won with the Giants. You could win with them, you could lose with them. Remember when the Giants got rid of Shockey and Tiki?
I do. And what happened after that?
Shouldn't they have been a worse team?
Instead,
No, they win the Super Bowl.
That's right.
Eli is a special kind of dude. He plays better, he leads better when the troublemakers go to the next city.
Mm.
So I think they're going to shock people this year. I got to look at their schedule again. I thought it was a soft opening.
I got in front of me right now. They open against who else? The Dallas Cowboys.
Right.
That's actually in the 4 game. That's in the 4 o'clock slot in week 1 for a change. And then September ends with 3 games for them. They're definitely winnable. Home against the Bills, at Tampa Bay, home against the Redskins.
Yeah, I thought it was a soft opening. I think they're going to come out the gates quickly. I don't know how we got there on the Giants. I always get us off track. It's up to you to get us back to the point. But it's funny. You track the history, and someone could do this better than us, but you track the history, and the teams that win the offseason usually disappoint, and the teams that trade away stars in an non-emotional factor, like the Steelers do it all the time, generally build something from there.
No, I get it.
So, that's the thing. That's the offseason battle fans always have to deal with in this league.
I think we see that a lot in both football and baseball, in which the team, quote unquote, that wins the offseason ends up not doing so well in the regular season. And you're absolutely right. I brought it up before, the Dream Team Eagles. Remember, they brought in all those guys and ended up going 8-8, 9-7, or whatever. It's so true. The NFL, anybody can beat anybody. And that's the absolute beauty and curse of it by the end of the day.
Yeah, curse if you're a Jets fan, because Belichick has figured it out.
Yes.
That, talent is so even that certain spots are more premium, and certain ways of coaching and game planning in a chameleon-like fashion each week is the way to dominance.
Absolutely. All right, I think that'll just about do it here on this edition of the Jets All the Way podcast. We'll continue our off-season discussion later this week, and we would like you, the fans, to get involved. We plan on broadcasting a lot more often, especially as we edge a little closer to the start of the 2019-20 NFL season. We encourage you to get to us on Twitter, on Facebook, wherever, and get your questions in, and we will answer them on the Jets All the Way podcast. Rob, any final thoughts as we end our introduction to the Jets offseason?
No, the dead period is almost over, everybody. 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks away. It's almost here.
That's absolutely right. Just hold out. Maybe enjoy some WNBA basketball in the meantime, as I'm currently working with the New York Liberty there. So check it out and maybe stick around after the training camp opens as well. But we'll keep it up with the Jets coverage right here on the Jets All the Way podcast. For Rob Sabo, I'm Jeff Maglicetti. Thanks for tuning in, folks.